Hey guys, welcome back to more Entitled People stories. In this video, some crazy squatters took over and destroyed my property. When confronted, they dared to sue me thinking they are invincible. Let's dive right into the video. The first one is titled, "My sister's squatter is texting her this while she is in critical condition in the ICU. She has not paid rent in 4+ months." Transcript of the text message from the squatter to the sister. The text message goes like this. "Only because you are sick, and yet with all my friendship and love, do you have clean sheets I can put and take the ones off your bed? Your room is a mess. I've been cleaning the entire house the entire day, and I would like for you to arrive to a nice home and a clean room. Tomorrow should be a new day for you, a white page to start. And no, that I'm doing this does not mean I'm gonna ask for a rain check on money matters. That stays. Perhaps precisely because of that, and because now I'm aware the money issues brought tension. I really want to clean the mess and clean the air for both of us. I screwed up big time, and I myself had gone through my own pain and medical issues. That doesn't mean we need to live the last days in a cold war. I care about you and I clearly see you need to heal. Please let me help. Again, it's the least I can do. Just let me know where they are." Now, after the text message, some background to the story. So, my sister has been non-communicative for several days, which has been odd. My parents are in Australia and the hospital could not reach her, so none of us knew that she has been ill. She has a severe infection to several organs and has been in and out of consciousness and has sepsis. We are worried for her life. This woman is 40 years old and constantly says that she'd have the rent, but after 3 months my sister filed to evict her and is suing in small claims court. The audacity of this woman, while my sister is critically ill, to call her room a mess and ask for bed sheets as if that equals not paying rent, is baffling. I've never seen a more tone-deaf text talking about her own medical and financial struggles, while my sister has been paying everything for her and is clinging to life. More info about the story: I'm flying out tomorrow in the morning and will be staying in my sister's room. I'm gonna be an absolute menace and make the apartment unlivable during my stay. I will keep you all posted and edit this later. My sister is more stable than this morning, but still not out of the woods. Thanks for the kind words. Edit, "Hi all, thank you so much for the words. I showed my sister this post and it cheered her up. Sorry I haven't updated much. I've barely slept since landing here and my sister's condition was very serious. She went into septic shock and nearly died, but she is stable now. As for the roommate situation, well, I'm also sorry for an anticlimactic update. As per my sister's request, she asked I not terrorize her because she is worried that her squatter will harm her dog when we are not home visiting her in the hospital. So I've just been stewing. Other than 1, being loud at night, and number 2, not intentional, but I've had these insanely loud and long farts, like my ass should have taken a long breath and let them rip when I walk by her door because she leaves it open. Number 3, having a loud conversation on the phone with my friend within earshot of how my sister has a piece of crap squatter that won't leave at 2 AM. She's also been excessively nice to me and said, "Make yourself at home." I replied, "Well, it is because I pay rent and I move into your room on first." Well, truth be told, I'm not actually doing that, but she reached out to my dad and asked to speak with him privately. I'm assuming about money and legal matters. The squatter, aka the roommate, is convinced that it was an old pizza that gave my sister sepsis and wanted to bring my sister flowers, to which I said, "My sister does not want to see you, quite frankly." She has also not been home other than that 30 minutes when I first arrived, so I haven't interacted with her hardly at all. Unfortunately, other than that conversation and waking her up accidentally. The real update will be on the 31st if she doesn't leave and if she doesn't pay what is owed for small claims court. I will update again then, hopefully with something more entertaining. Another update: my sister is stable and got discharged a day or 2 before the 31st. She could not do some things by herself, so my mom decided to stay with her until she could function fully on her own. I wanted to stay, but there was no room in that 2-bed apartment between the 5 of us, including the squatter, so my dad and I flew home. Unsurprisingly, the squatter, aka roommate, came up with some BS reason why she could not pay the $6,000 or whatever it was that she said she was going to before being evicted. Side note, I was under the impression the small claims were already served, but it was not. I also did not know that she did not have US citizenship, and having a criminal record means deportation. So the squatter says she can only pay $2,000 and the rest will be on a payment plan. My mom said absolutely not. Squatter then says she talked to my dad on Facebook and made out a payment plan. If you knew my dad, you would know that would never happen. My mom says, okay, let's call my husband then. She calls and my dad says he never received a message or agreed to a payment plan. The squatter admits that she just lied to my mom's face. My mom says that she needs to pay $6,000 immediately. The squatter begins telling another BS story as to why she cannot pay. My mom gets the papers, serves her the lawsuit and says, "No, you're paying it all." At this point, the squatter freaked out and said, "But I could be deported." Mom said, "Not my problem." Then she started crying and went on this long sob story about how she was assaulted when she was 8 and is struggling with alcoholism. My mom said, "Sorry, but that doesn't mean that you cannot pay rent. If you pay everything before your court date, we will drop the lawsuit, but if not, we will take you to court and you'll be deported." She paid everything and left, so she had the money the entire time. I guess on her way out, she thanked my sister for being nice and complained about my mom and I being aggressive. My sister said, "Quite frankly, you're lucky you roomed with me because I don't know if my sister wouldn't have beaten the crap out of you and then robbed you, or robbed you first and then beat the crap out of you." Which is a little bit of an exaggeration, but my mom said her face was priceless. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for all the kind words, it really cheered my sister up. And yeah, Ripe Stars, there's nothing that gets my blood boiling more. I mean, well, there are a few things, but definitely it's up there than entitled squatters refusing to leave a property, especially when they refuse to pay rent. Have you ever dealt with squatters, especially a roommate turning into a squatter? Let me know in the comments. And while you're at it, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and maybe even like the video, because that would help me tremendously. The next one is the title story. So I live in a slightly rural, backwoods part of Europe. I travel for work sometimes, and the most I'm ever gone is a couple of weeks. It turned out that was more than enough time for people to get into my house and become squatters. I came home to just find people living there and flat out refusing to leave. I didn't know much about squatters and how they got away with things, but it was my house and I was sure that I could just make them leave. But I was wrong. It turns out that getting rid of squatters can be a long process, and the police could not offer much help or force them to get out. They basically claimed to have established residency here, and I was not able to get them to leave. I also couldn't stay in the house with them because they were very threatening towards me and I did not know what they were capable of. So basically they had managed to steal my house, but I was still there on a daily basis to try and tell them that they had to leave. They would get aggressive and tell me that the more I came, the more of my house they would destroy, going so far as to spit at me and just be horrible in general. Then one of them said the dumbest thing they could have. "What are you gonna do? Sue us?" That was exactly what I was gonna do, but first I was gonna make sure that I had enough evidence to not only get them out of my house, but ruin the rest of their lives. So the first thing was I stopped paying for utilities and other things because I was not using them. The electricity, gas and water all got turned off once the bills stopped getting paid, as well as the internet and cable being turned off. If they wanted to be squatters, they were not gonna get any amenities from me. I was basically playing the long game with these guys and had a notebook filled with incidents. They got bolder and started throwing parties and even having more people coming to live in my house with them. Every single time they broke noise codes, I called the police to get them shut up. Every single time I noticed them doing something illegal, I took a photo and marked it down in my book. Mainly, they liked using recreational drugs that were not legal here and probably never would be. Just to give an idea of what kind of drugs they were doing, I started to go online and research all of the ordinances in our city to find something they were breaking, and it turns out they were doing two things that were major violations. Under the list of things that were punishable by jail time, the first being that they now had way too many people living in the house considering its size, and yes, over-occupancy of a residence where I live is not allowed and on the list of major offenses. The second being that since I turned off the water, they were now actually stealing it from one of my neighbors using their own weird hose system through the backyard. I had enough on them and did what they joked about months ago, suing them. I got a lawyer and showed him everything that I collected over the course of 2 months. It was plenty to get them forced into a courtroom and have to answer for their actions. The only thing they were doing was claiming they had squatters' rights, and that meant I was not allowed to kick them out of my house. Not knowing that I also filed for them to be formally evicted from the property. They got letters that my guess is they ignored or were too high to even notice, so they were being evicted, but this was not the court session to deal with those matters. This was about everything else they did and the laws they had broken. With all of this on their record, it would be nearly impossible for them to get proper and legal housing in the future. Their background report would come up with all of this crap. They were in trouble for the drugs and illegal water theft and would be tried in criminal court for all those things. The house was being inspected and they were going to be forced to pay for every single thing that they broke here, having to pay massive fines for repairs which they did in fact have the money for. Some might think that all squatters and poor homeless people just look for somewhere warm and safe to stay, and well, these people were not that and even had jobs they were somehow doing from the house with no internet. They had money, they just didn't want to bother using it for a house because then there would be so much less of it for drugs. The cost for repairing my home basically wiped them out though. They did have the other court case where they were formally evicted and a sheriff came and got them out of the house, finally getting to see what I wanted from the start months ago. The police having to drag them out of my property and telling them that they had no right to stay there. The last court case they had was for all the other illegal activity, and the police doing a sweep of the home showed that it was filled with drugs and pipes and all that kind of stuff. The drug charges alone were enough to put them in jail, but mixing it with everything else did not even give them a chance of walking away free. They really thought that squatters' rights meant they could do anything they wanted as long as it was related to them squatting on the property. I've no idea how they managed to convince themselves the drugs were legal since they were in a house that they were illegally staying in. Also, the other people that they invited to move in also got in trouble for the drugs and other stuff, just not in as much as the original two people that started this entire thing, as they were found out to be the dealers and mastermind behind this entire thing. I'm happy to say that right now my house looks as good as before all of this happened. It was a crazy ride with me learning a lot about things I never thought I would have to. I do think the laws need to change to make it easier to get squatters out of people's homes and it not be such a long and horrible process. I don't fully understand at the root why the police couldn't force them out on the first day I came home and noticed them, but still, my house is back in one piece and I can relax. I now have multiple locks on my door, as well as a security system that will hopefully discourage anybody else from thinking they can just take my property. I'm still nervous to go away for work for too long, but my boss understands, thankfully, due to everything that happened. I know it sounds bad and petty, but I hope that they are forever marked and have trouble finding homes for themselves. And well, Ripe Stars, I would say that is not petty at all. Honestly, if I would be in that situation, I would only wish the absolute worst on these entitled crazy squatters. The next one is titled A War Between Neighbors. So I live in a decent neighborhood, lots of lakes, mature trees and good-sized lots. Even without an HOA, people maintain their property to reasonable standards, and then there are those for whom reasonable is not good enough. Any deviation is a problem. Meet neighbor number 1 who bought a foreclosure house and invested a lot of money renovating and landscaping his yard, and it is immaculate. He lives next to neighbor number 2 who is less stringent but fine. Number 1 had a hissy fit when he found out that neighbor number 2 was the decoration house. It's spectacular. Halloween and Christmas draw crowds with people coming into neighbor number 1's yard to get selfies. The petty war begins with a comical amount of no trespassing and please don't park on the grass signs on the swale. The next Christmas, neighbor number 2's inflatables are slashed in the middle of the night by a group of kids, aka people in hoodies. Number 2 blames number 1 for arranging the hit on Santa and his friends. Neighbor number 1 then gets a couple of little dogs. Neighbor 2 accuses him of purposely having them crap in his yard and puts up several of those obnoxious "please pick up after your dog" signs. The following week, hundreds of identical green poop bags filled and neatly tied appear on neighbor number 2's yard. It snowed poop bags in Florida. Now the sprinkler wars have begun when either party has a gathering. It's amusing for now and I hope it doesn't escalate. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I am entering the non-existent competition for worst mother-in-law. Sadly, the prize I think is just having the worst one, which is the opposite of a prize. Either way, I hope you guys enjoy this story and I really hope that nobody reading this has a mother-in-law that can come close to comparing to mine. You know how sometimes when you're dating somebody, their family is nice and amazing, but as soon as you marry them, you see the horrible people they really are. Well, this is nothing like that, because from the first day I met her, I was told to my face by my future mother-in-law that she hated me. With the main reason just being that I was Chinese while her and her son were Korean. As an Asian American, I know that there's some beef between us, but this was insane. She would constantly talk down about Chinese people when I was sitting right there. It was the first time too, so I did not want to make a scene or just get up and walk out. Instead, I got to hear a lecture about how Korea is so much better in every single way, even going so far as to ask her son to dump me right in front of me and instead go and find a nice Korean girl. I'll admit that part was done to him in Korean, which she did not know I understood. I very nicely told my future husband that I did not want to have another meal like that, and he agreed it was a bad idea. I was not gonna dump somebody because of their mother being a racist, so we just kept dating. I knew that his mother was probably talking about me to him, but I did not want to know the things she was saying. It would do me no good to hear her comments, and I knew that he was a good enough guy to not be listening or buying into anything she was saying. Jumping ahead 2 years later, and we were planning for our wedding. When it came to talking about the guest list, the topic of his mother was brought up. He knew that I did not like her, but he only had one parent and really wanted her there. We had a discussion of possible outcomes and in the end came to the conclusion that in a room that was half Chinese, she was not gonna get away with saying something horrible to me. I wanted to believe that she just wanted to be at her son's wedding, despite not liking the person that he was marrying. He also had other family there that he would ask to keep an eye on her and make sure she did not even get near me. With all that in place, I agreed to being okay with her coming to the wedding and did not think anything else of it. I had much more planning to do, and a single person was not gonna take up my thoughts. Then the day of the wedding came, and before we even managed to have the ceremony, did disaster strike. I was in a back room getting ready and had yet to put on my dress. With me was my mother, my sister, and my bridesmaid. I guess mother-in-law got wind of what was going on and came back, basically inviting herself to get ready with the rest of the girls. I did not want her there, but again was not gonna be the one to start a fight at my own wedding. I just smiled at her and finished getting my makeup done as she walked around. Nobody even noticed that she seemed to vanish for a few minutes, but then we all smelled and saw the smoke and heard mother-in-law laughing. When we went to see what happened, we saw that my wedding dress was on fire and she was standing there just holding a lighter. Talking about how now I could not marry her son. The fire spread from the dress and got some curtains, causing the entire building to be evacuated. I ran right to my husband and told him what his mother did and that she had ruined my dress. She was even thinking he would side with her, but instead he was the one that asked for charges to be pressed once the police arrived. She had gone too far and he was not about to defend her destroying my dress. She was put into handcuffs and shoved into the back of a police car. We scrambled to figure out what to do, and I ended up wearing one of the bridesmaid dresses that was my size, while she got some random clothes from her car to wear instead. The rest of the wedding was fine, but I was to move ahead to more of the mother-in-law story. So she was found guilty of destruction of property for the dress. Also, she was found guilty of arson because the building also caught fire and caused damage. Finally, the venue pressed charges because they wanted her to pay for the damage she caused. She had zero remorse for what she did and tried to say it was my fault for marrying her son. She ended up getting sentenced to 5 years in prison and was not happy about it. Now, I know this is where most stories would end, but not mine. Going to jail did not stop her from trying to keep me and my husband apart. She kept sending us letters in the mail telling us that we had to get divorced, telling her son that I was no good for him because I was Chinese, and he clearly would end up poor and childless. When none of that obviously worked, she started sending us threats in the mail from prison. Now, the way I believe prison mail works is that it is screened by guards so that people cannot write to send drugs or other crime stuff. I don't know if it was because they didn't have anybody to screen her mail or they just did not bother doing it. Anyway, she was writing these letters in Korean and there was a chance that nobody working at that jail could read it. Inside those letters were threats that she had connections to a hitman and the money to hire one. That if my husband and me did not get a divorce, she would have him come to the house and kill me. The nasty letters I could ignore, but this one scared the crap out of me. I told my husband I was really worried, so we took all the letters to the cops to file an official complaint. It turns out they take these threats very seriously, and despite already being in jail, she was now being charged for harassment and threats. While threats are not a criminal offense, she is not allowed to write certain things in her prison letters, and even though it did not get screened, it was her fault. She got another 3 years added to her sentence and a ton of new restrictions put on her. Since they could not trust her with it anymore, she was not allowed to send mail out unless she wrote it in English, which she 100% could do and just was not in order to not get censored. She was also not allowed to send any mail to me or my husband because we now had an order of protection against her. The same rules went for phone calls, that if they couldn't screen what she was saying, she would not be allowed to make them. Since now there was a risk of her trying to get in contact with a hitman, I feel much safer and happier that she is in jail, but for a while I felt bad for my husband. I knew she was horrible, but it's still his mother, and I assumed he would be a little sad that she was in jail. But instead I noticed his entire demeanor change. He seemed happier and sure of himself since his mom was not able to talk to him. I don't know what kind of things she would say to him about other aspects of his life, but he is way better off without them. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.